We got an increase in patient admissions. All of that started within 1 week of the rollout of the COVID vaccine to the public. So she was witnessing, I was witnessing, both of us independently contacted our management and said, hey, we're seeing a dramatic increase in drug side effect. We need to document this so that it can be recorded and researched. My friend, she was actually told, if you report these side effects, we will fire you. I was told, no. We can't report those because we cannot prove that they are being caused by the vaccines. I was receiving 3 to 4 phone calls a day from my staffing department begging me to come to work every single day. What does that mean? They were desperate for staff. This hospital has had 3 times more admissions than we've ever had since the hospital opened their doors. I went and spoke to all of our city officials publicly, and I told them what was happening in the hospitals, and I informed everybody about the things that nobody wanted to report on, and I got silenced there too. Do you know how many people I met who they themselves or their partners were targeted and destroyed for curing cancer? A practitioner who was curing cancer, they didn't want him to continue working because his work was changing the world, so they set him up. Videos planted on his computer.
Child porn.
Yes, I am of value enough to tell the truth, no matter what the cost.
Guys, there is one issue that I have to address. I believe YouTube is going to demonetize this video and even try to erase it. So it's crucial, if you are still watching this, if you're still seeing this right now, please like this video, share with all your friends, peers, and loved ones. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already, and please leave a comment below. Guys, I don't have any sponsors. I'm not trying to sell you NFTs, crypto scams, and everything in between. So please, your contribution, your free contribution by subscribing, liking, sharing, and commenting below helps my channel a lot. And please watch this video till the very end. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. But now, let's get back to the podcast with the one and only Gail Macrae. Gail Macrae, registered nurse, former Student Certified Nurse Midwife, and a women's health nurse practitioner. She completed the education for her next NP degree, but was not permitted to complete the 700 clinical hours for certification due to COVID-19 vaccine mandate dispute, proving her natural immunity to COVID-19. She worked in acute care for 10 years in ICU, cardiac, telemetry, MedSurg, and labor and delivery as a registered nurse. During the COVID pandemic, she worked at Kaiser Permanente in the Bay Area of California and saw firsthand that the media and government organizations were deceiving the public on all things related to COVID-19. As a result, she chose to stand up for fundamental rights by leaving the hospital setting to advocate for justice and pursue legal action against the COVID crimes she witnessed. She believes that we must recreate and reimagine a private parallel wellness system focused on addressing the root cause of illness and disease rather than symptom management, married to the restoration of ethics, courage, sovereignty, wisdom, and a mindset of abundance in both patient and practitioners. She now works nationally as an ethics and leadership coach, a patient advocate, and now has an alternative legal education which she uses to direct and inform ethical leadership. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
This podcast has been was in the making, let's say, for 6 months, I want to say, right? You were traveling.
Yes.
So let's get right into it. Please tell me the story, what happened during the COVID. That was 2020 and 2021, right? What happened?
That's correct. Yes. So at the time, I was in graduate school, and I was working for Kaiser Permanente in Northern California. I worked for Kaiser in Santa Rosa, California. Mm-hmm. And I'd been working for them for 5 years. During that time, I specialized in cardiac, telemetry, strokes, but I spent a lot of my career working throughout the hospital, doing a position called per diem, which is where you basically come in and work wherever they're shorthanded. Mm-hmm. I started my career in ICU and telemetry, and then kind of transitioned more into telemetry and MedSurg. And then I always knew I wanted to work with women and facilitate childbirth during nursing school. I saw a lot of violations taking place in labor and delivery, and a lot of failures of informed consent. And in a position where you're dealing with a mother who's bringing a child into the world, This is one of the most extraordinary moments of a family's life, and it sets the tone for the future of the family. And seeing violations in that area of the hospital really shook me deeply.
Violations like what?
So just not giving informed consent. So a lot of the medications that they give for inducing labor, for helping women manage pain, they are not actually telling you the side effects and the risks and the benefits, and they're not actually offering alternatives. So for instance, in graduate school, I learned that doing warm water baths while women are in labor, warm water births, they actually have been shown in research to be just as effective for managing the pain of labor as morphine injections. And the issue is that with, say, morphine injections, there are multiple issues that you're causing when you give those. You're subjecting the woman to a higher risk of having pretty severe constipation and bowel obstructions. And when we're dealing...
You can get morphine during labor?
Yes.
Morphine?
Morphine is given during labor for severe pain.
IV?
Yes. That's correct. It's one of the more common pain management options. Of course, they start with oral pain medications, and if women need more than that, they'll reach for the epidural or morphine injections. So, or cocktails. They'll do, a couple different drugs at once. But the issue is that all of those medications, every single one of them, increase the woman's risk for what's called postpartum hemorrhage. And what people don't understand is that here in the United States, we have the highest risk of maternal death of any country in the world. And the number one reason for that is postpartum hemorrhage. So when you add the pieces up and you start to actually analyze the details of, hey, why is this happening? We're not really assessing the reason for why. There's no incentive to. But when we know that all of these medications have black box warning for postpartum hemorrhage, or at least risks as a severe side effect, and we know that the United States has the highest number of postpartum hemorrhage and causing the death of childbearing women, and you put those two together, there's a pretty clear correlation that at the very least should be paid more attention to.
Out of all countries, out of 200 plus countries, you're the number one?
It is more safe for a woman to give birth in Yemen than it is in the United States. Yes, I looked at the data. We can pull it up. It is it's been consecutively proven that way. And to be quite clear, it's getting worse. And now, as a matter of fact, in addition to the highest risk for maternal death postpartum, we're also having higher rates of fetal deaths in this country. I don't think we've come close to the top yet, but it's definitely not. It's not going in the right direction. And again, I like to bring this back to the fact that we're using so many interventions. We're not actually giving true informed consent, and women are afraid. Okay, so that's the other aspect of this that I think is really important to touch on, because we in this culture in the United States, all of the TV shows, everything you see and look at, they talk about, oh gosh, labor is like this woman screaming like bloody murder and she's in so much pain. It's like you're setting the stage. You're planting that seed in a woman's mind about what to expect during labor. So when she enters the room, especially as a first-time mom, she's walking in terrified. And so the physiological components of that, of fear, okay, so this is what happens. A woman gets scared, and then her body releases hormones that put her into fight or flight, cortisol, right? Our bodies pump out cortisol. We divert into fight or flight. And what happens when that goes down? Here's what happens. Blood circulation vasoconstricts, okay? So your body shunts all the blood to your vital organs, okay? That's heart and lungs. What happens to the uterus? It shuts down. So now we have a woman who's afraid, in fight or flight, with no blood flow or circulation to the uterus and the birthing organs that are required to have a successful delivery. You have no blood supply. So of course, these systems, right, they're shutting down because the woman is afraid. And then what happens? The pain response escalates dramatically. Again, the same thing, cortisol, your body becomes hypersensitive to the pain response. So we start this cascade that just leads women into interventions. And so then, right, so we set the stage with the mindset, and then we enter into the cascade of medications through this pathway of the mindset. And then, of course, we end up with terrible outcomes in this country. So those were the things that I was aware of during nursing school, and then also walking into my nurse practitioner degree that drove me to become a nurse practitioner to fight for women's rights, because I could see that we weren't giving proper informed consent. I could see the outcomes from that, and I'm a healer. I was born to be a healer. I came here to protect people, to step into the role of leadership in those ways. And so it was a natural progression for me. And then COVID happened, and all of that went out the window because I witnessed crimes against humanity that could so overarched the things I was seeing in labor and delivery that I couldn't stay on track any longer.
Please tell us.
This episode is brought to you by the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Lamb, the Lion of Judah, the Son of God, the Son of Man, the God Himself, my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Guys and gals, if you ever feel down, if you feel like there is no hope in life, you can always turn to Christ, and He will comfort you. Just like it says in the Bible, Matthew 18, verse 28. It says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Guys and gals, if you haven't found Jesus Christ yet, I encourage you to do it. Seek and you will find. Start reading the Bible. Read the gospel, and I promise you, you will not be disappointed by what you read. May God bless you and your whole family. And now, let's get back to the podcast.
And when we were young, and the world
What kind of violation did you see
So-
during the COVID?
It was everything. The first signs that really made me uncomfortable were the fact that we were being propagandized on the media. So even in the hospital, all the healthcare providers were being terrified by what we were seeing on the news and by all of the things that were being put out on social media about how dangerous COVID was, about how many people were dying. And so staff members right out the gate were really terrified. And so that really set the stage for us to not have the tools to properly analyze the true risks and benefits of both the protocols and the true risks of the virus itself. And I'll tell you, for me, there are several reasons why I was immune to those things coming out the gate. My background is really important in this scenario because I was homeschooled. And it is my strong belief that being homeschooled arms you with a lot of mental tools and tactics that public school children don't have access to. So growing up, I wasn't ever forced into the standard model of education where, you take a test and if you don't perform well, then you suck at this subject. And I wasn't told that, I had to fit into this box of what it meant to be smart or do well. I was supported in actually discovering what I was good at and supported in feeling like I had the skills to take care of whatever it was in the world around me that might impact me. But most importantly, the most important thing about that homeschool education, I remember in high school, and it was basically a spitting image of what took place during COVID. In high school, I remember feeling like, gosh, I wish I could go to school because I'm not getting what these other kids are getting, and it's scary and it sucks and I'm different and like all these things. But at the end of the day, what that did for me is it gave me the tools and the skills to really identify, well, hey, just because you don't fit in and you're not like the other kids, you still have your own value and self-worth. And so that conversation, that inner dialogue really taught me to recognize that my value and self-worth didn't have to be based on the acceptance of my peers.
Right.
And I witnessed that with my classmates, my high school friends. I would watch them give away their value and self-worth for the acceptance of their peers. And the exact same thing happened in the hospital during COVID. So I saw it basically on replay. I looked around and I noticed like, wow, I'll have conversations with my colleagues in the back room and we'll be talking about these COVID protocols and how they're causing these patients to go into organ failure, but they won't say anything about it because they're too afraid of getting rejected by their peers. They're too afraid of losing their jobs to stand up and step into their authentic knowing, which is that our protocols were killing people. So the protocols for COVID, people say their loved ones died of COVID. I'm sorry, but that's not the way it went down. People actually died in the hospital from the protocols. So we knew in March of 2020, there was one of the most published and prestigious ICU doctors in the United States. His name was Dr. Pierre Corey. He came out right out the gate, him and his colleague, I forget his name, but there were a couple of doctors nationally known for their expertise in intensive care. So that's like dealing with people who are about to die. And they came out screaming like, hey, everyone who has COVID is responding extraordinarily well to high doses of IV steroids. And of course, so it made perfect sense. I looked at their data and I looked at what I know because I worked ICU. I know the whole hospital. When a patient is going into an inflammatory response, so that's something people should know about COVID. COVID, whatever it was, it caused more inflammation in the human body than we'd ever seen from any infectious disease in my career as a nurse working for the hospitals. So that was over 10 years. So, and we measure that by labs. There's a lab called a CRP. And you can clearly see how much inflammation is in the body when a person is under attack. You know, their immune system is under attack. So we had CRP levels that were more than double that I had ever seen. I mean, they were out the roof. And so because I knew that, and then I heard these ICU intensivists that were nationally known for their expertise come out and say, we need to be giving all these patients high-dose steroids because immediately their bodies would respond. And of course they would. Steroids are an anti-inflammatory. They correct the inflammatory response. So that was March of 2020. That was before the vaccines, before anything happened. We knew that we had an effective tool for managing the inflammation of COVID. And the CDC and the leadership for our health industries in the United States completely shut that down. So that's when they started labeling Pierre Corey. And that was just like, what? Like, this guy has been nationally known for his whole career for his ability to, brainstorm and come up with solutions for really intensive situations rapidly. Like, he had already made a name for himself in the United States medical organizations because of his expertise. And so, it just didn't make any sense. Like, how can they censor this man who clearly doesn't have an agenda? He's clearly offering a solution that A, makes sense, B, actually works. And he has the background and expertise to make that recommendation. So why is the medical why are the medical agencies ignoring him? So there we are, right, through the first year of COVID, not administering high-dose IV steroids. And that to me, so when I analyze that from my medical background and the oath that I took and my duty as a medical practitioner, A, to do no harm, but B, to save the lives of my patients. And now we're being forced to withhold a treatment that I know would save their lives. So we were withholding steroids. We were also withholding nebulizer treatments. So
What is that?
when patients are hospitalized in acute respiratory distress, they are always prescribed nebulization treatments. So what they do is they use this drug. So there are several different ones. They hook them up to a machine that turns them into a mist.
Okay.
And then you can breathe it in through your sinuses and immediately vasodilates your bronchioles. So it takes...
I know what it's like because I had asthma.
Yes.
15 years.
So it's the same basic thing, except for you sit there with the mask on and you just breathe it in for a couple of minutes. And then they come back and they do those treatments like every 4 hours in the hospital when people... So before COVID, anyone who had respiratory distress or any kind of lung inflammatory disorder, they would be given a nebulization treatment every 4 hours. It was a no-brainer. It was like, of course. And I mean, you don't even have to ask for that stuff. I mean, you can ask for it, but the answer's always been yes. So during COVID, for some reason, and I still can't make sense of this, the CDC came out and said, oh, well, we're not going to allow the hospitals to do nebulization treatments because we don't want to risk getting the healthcare providers sick. And if we nebulize coronavirus, it might cause the staff to become exposed to the virus because it's in a nebulized form. So
does it make sense?
So my response to that is, by that point in time, so that's April, May of 2020, we had already had a peer-reviewed study put out by one of the highest Stanford docs in the United States, one of the Stanford researchers. Bhattacharya is his name, and he's now working for this administration. So he did a study on the death rates, he was trying to get down to the true mortality rates of COVID. And so by April of 2020, he'd released a study analyzing, I don't remember how many people now, but a lot of people in California. He did he gathered their results and checked their blood to see if they had antibodies for COVID in order to determine what the actual case fatality rate is. Like, so how many people actually died? What's the percentage rate of death from COVID? And his results showed that they were between 0.9 and 1.7%, I believe, which is comparable to influenza. So I saw that data. Everyone had access to that data by April of 2020. So coming back to this conversation about, we can't do respiratory treatments because we might get the staff sick. If the death rate from COVID is the same as the death rate for influenza, and we've never in our lives withheld those kinds of respiratory treatments from people who had influenza, there's no rational sense. There's no sense in it. So they chose to withhold it. They gave up a phony reason, and it wasn't based in science or logic. And people were so afraid that they just accepted those regulations. But like I said, I talked about the homeschooling background. The other thing I didn't tell you is that I worked in Africa for a year as a nurse. So I was delivering babies and working in a hospital in rural Africa where we had very little access. And that experience really changed my whole engagement with patients in a way that it stopped me from having irrational fear reactions to intense situations. Because working in Africa with no access, you learn how to make it work. And having that kind of experience really taught me how to not become a victim of the fear mentality of oh my gosh, this patient might code or die or whatever. You just have to figure it out. And so a lot of these tactics that we were being exposed to during COVID just really didn't. I wasn't afraid. I was able to step outside of the fear of what the media was saying and what a lot of the organizations, the medical organizations were saying, and just analyze the data. Because I was trained to analyze the data, because I'd done the nurse practitioner education. We spend a whole semester learning how to analyze research and how to make it.
Because it's science.
It's science, that's right. And so because I was in that program, I had access to all the research. So, as soon as I'd hear the media say something, I'd just get onto my school site and pull up the data and start reading it. And then, and during that time, so that's when the Pfizer data was released too for their vaccine in October. And that was another situation where it's okay, well, I have the data on my hands. I'm looking at it. A plus B does not equal C. The conclusion of the paper doesn't match the data that's in the actual research. So we're not being given the honest truth of the safety and efficacy of either of these things. So I knew that with the case fatality rate. I knew that with the Pfizer data. And again, it was because I wasn't coming in with a predisposition of fear, and B, I had my hands all over the data, and I love to analyze data. I just love to do it. I'm just yeah, give me that data. I'll read it and I'll pick it apart. So I did that with one of the papers. I got myself in a little bit of trouble when they started recommending the COVID vaccine to pregnant women, because I was part of the oh gosh, am I going to forget the name of this group? It's a national group of nurse practitioners and nurse doctorates, PhDs in nursing in the field of obstetrics and gynecology. It was it might come to me. But I was part of this group because I was one of them. We're on an email chains, and some of the nurse midwives were voicing concern. They were saying this is experimental. We're being told to recommend this to pregnant women, but it's not ethical to recommend an experimental injection to pregnant women. We've never done that in the whole history of medicine. Why are we doing it now? And
this has never been done before, ever?
Never. It's actually, before COVID, it was considered taboo. And if it was done, you couldn't have gotten away with it. The only reason they got away with it is because people were so afraid. It is known in the medical organizations that we do not give experimental vaccines to pregnant women ever. So that, I'm pretty sure it's in the code of ethics for the OBGYNs. You don't do it.
Because you can do harm not only to a mother, but to a child as well.
Correct. That's correct, because it can lead to the death. And so we've seen the fallout with that. In the 1960s, women were given a drug for morning sickness.
Oh.
I forget the name of it. It's not coming to mind right now, but it ended up causing severe birth defects, and it skipped a generation. So the women would end up having these babies that were severely abnormal. And so that was another one of the leading components to why we don't administer experimental or unknown drugs to pregnant women, because the fallout is so drastic. It's generational. It's multi-generational.
It's life-changing.
And the same thing is happening with this COVID vaccine. One of my good friends, Michelle Gershman, she was a labor and delivery nurse here in California, and her hospital released the data to the staff members about the changes in infant mortality directly associated to the onset of administering the COVID vaccines to their patients. And the hospital admitted in this document that before the COVID vaccines, she was seeing 1 to 2 fetal demises per month. Sorry, 1 fetal demise every 1 to 2 months. So it's less than 1 fetal demise per month. after the rollout of the COVID vaccine, they were seeing between 20 and 23 fetal deaths per month.
20 times more.
More than 20.
And how many
times more.
babies were delivered in that hospital per month?
Thousands.
Thousands.
So she's got the data. She just launched a lawsuit on this because there are multiple OBGYN whistleblowers on this as well, seeing the increased rate of fetal demises directly linked to vaccination status. So the lawsuit was just launched within the last month, and I'm going to help them as much as I can with data and resources because I have a lot. Because that's all I've done since I left the field is blow the whistle and connect and collaborate with practitioners and wellness providers all over the United States who are willing, who have the courage to stand up and say, this is wrong. We need to talk about it and do something about it. So that's really the distinguishing feature here. So during COVID, right, I was in that hospital watching my colleagues just cower under the pressure. It was pure pressure.
Nurses only or doctors too?
All of them. I think that the doctors, the more that I learn about what it takes to become a doctor, the more I feel pity for them because it's really an initiation. In order to become a doctor, I mean,
You have to agree with everything that is written in the books.
Yeah, they tear you down and rebuild you into, this provider. The processes that doctors have to go through to become doctors, nothing like nurses. I mean, I could get a doctorate in nursing and have the same education as those doctors, but we just don't think the same. And I think that it has a lot to do with the way that they structure their education.
Give me an example. What do you think? So,
one of the things, and this is one of the things that I love to bring up when it comes to the difference between doctors and nurses. So for me, right, I was a nurse. I worked in the hospital for 10 years. And then I went back to school and I studied to become a nurse practitioner. So I'd had 10 years of hands-on experience in the hospital working with patients and watching what happened. So when I was in my nurse practitioner program.
Excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. What's the difference between a nurse and a nurse practitioner? So
a nurse practitioner, they have, so we go through first technically it's 5.5 years, but it's a 4-year bachelor's degree in science. And then we get the RN on top of that. And then to become a nurse practitioner, you have to go through another, it's 2.5 to 3 year program.
So what do NPs do that RNs don't do? So
NPs have their primary care providers. So we have independent practitioner licenses. So that's pretty much honored throughout the United States. So it's comparable to a DO. The DOs might have a slightly more education. So they're doctors, but they have a DO instead of an MD. So it's like a doctorate of osteopathic medicine. There's several different DOs, but that's the most popular one. And those doctors, they have a master's degree and then they have residency. So that's basically what nurse practitioners are. We have a master's degree and then we have residency. Our residency is for instance, mine was 700 hours. I think theirs is more. They probably get 2 or 3 times the amount of residency hour, but that's the only difference between a doctor, a DO doctor, and a nurse practitioner. So we have roughly very comparable education levels. And the MD, so the MDs have a little bit more. I think they have 9 or 10 years in school, and then their residency, I think, is the same as the DOs. But they're more in the same ballpark.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, so I went through my bachelor's and became an RN, and then I worked in the field for 10 years, and then I went back for my nurse practitioner degree. So during that time, so this is something that I realized as a studying nurse practitioner, when after working in the field for 10 years and then going back and taking the practitioner pathophysiology course, pharmacology. So pharmacology is the study of medications, correct. And what I realized when I was taking that class in my graduate degree was that I couldn't believe it, but that at that level, you start studying polypharmacy, which is the interactions of people taking different drugs. So when your patient is taking, 5 different drugs, what are going to be the potential side effects? What do you look for? How do you identify if somebody is suffering drug side effects from polypharmacy? So in graduate school, when I took that class, I was able to reflect on my 10 years working on the floor with these patients who are all being hospitalized. And what I realized that probably over 50% of my patients that I cared for in those last 10 years were actually being hospitalized for undiagnosed drug side effects. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's putting the dots together. And I think that one of the primary reasons for that, besides the fact that, we're taught to walk around through our careers with our blinders up and just say, yes, everything we learned is correct. Like pharmaceuticals help people, vaccines are safe and effective, all of the things.
Well, pharmaceuticals do help people.
So that's what we've been told.
But when you need that
that's what we've been told. And what I'm saying is that in that master's degree, when I started actually analyzing my patient population, what I realized is that we actually have way more patients out there in the world walking around who are having undiagnosed drug side effects, and they're being hospitalized for them, and nobody's even assessing it. So, and that's half of my patients, roughly.
That's insane. Give me an example.
A lot of them are internal bleeding. Then there's a lot of myopathies, a lot of dementia and neurological disorders. Those are the most common.
Internal bleeding because of a drug?
Correct. Drug side effects, multiple drugs.
What kind of drug can cause this?
So a high risk drug profile for these types of drugs are the anti-acid drugs, the other one.
Anti-acid is a reflux?
Yes, acid reflux drug.
You can get bleedings?
Yes.
Because of the
and especially when you take them long term. Another really high risk drug that we don't really talk about is metformin. It's the diabetes medication. It has adverse interactions with multiple other drugs, causing severe side effects that can lead to hospitalization. The other ones too, bowel obstructions, huge risks for bowel obstructions from polypharmacy. And that's the thing, that's like most of my patient population are bowel obstructions, cancers, which that's a separate subject, bleeds, internal bleeding, and neurological disorders. And all those were the 3 most common drug interactions that I saw when I was studying polypharmacy in that practitioner program. So at what point, and so here's the point. Here's the point I want to make. Doctors, they go straight from their science degree to their residency to work.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you're spending your whole life just studying and then working in the field without really taking a break to stop. So for instance, like with me, I was working in the field before I learned about the drug interactions. So when you do that, so the doctors who are learning about the drug interactions and then going to work in the field, you have a different application of that knowledge because you've already been told, oh, it's safe and effective. You don't have to worry about drug side effects. They're very rare, right? And then you go in the hospital setting and you're like, oh, well, I've already been told that these drug side effects are very rare. And, this isn't actually a concern. So with my situation, it's the reverse. I was working in the field. I was seeing my patients firsthand. And then I went and learned, oh, these are the drug reactions from polypharmacy, but side effects are rare. So it changes the experience because now I'm looking at that and I'm questioning, well, wait a minute. I've already seen all this in the hospital.
Yeah, but that was in the past.
Years.
You can't change that.
Right.
So it's better for you to learn in the first place. Drug A plus B plus C can cause this, and that. And then you go into a practice and you see, okay, this guy or this gal came into my ICU because of this and she's having this. I'm asking her what kind of meds was she taking and she says A, B, and C. So this is the result.
Right. And then when you see those results and you're able to put the two and two together so much more effectively, and that's why I was able to put the two and two together, because I had already recognized these drug side effects in the past. So the docs, they learn about it and then they go into practice and they forget. They forget about the polypharmacy side effects, or, it's a different interaction. It's a different way of processing and experiencing the information when you go from learning it to practice than you do from practice and then learning. It changes the dynamics, and it gave me that revelation that, gosh, I don't think that we're properly documenting or discussing or researching these drug side effects. At the very least, there needs to be more data. And so this is what I saw with the COVID vaccines, right? So when we rolled out the COVID vaccines in my hospital, one of my colleagues, my girlfriend, who manned the COVID vaccination clinic, she was seeing between 8 and 12 episodes of anaphylactic shock per day within 20 minutes of administering the COVID vaccine.
Per day?
Per day. Between 8 and 12. And I was hearing it on the floor, because on the floors, we would hear the code blues from it. So my whole career as a nurse, 10 years working in the hospitals, I would hear on average about 1 code blue per shift.
Code blue is what?
Code blue is when somebody stops breathing or their heart stops. It's a medical emergency. So when a code blue is called in the hospital, there's a team of medical providers that respond who are experts in managing an emergency. So in my career, we would get an average of 1 code blue per shift. Sometimes there'd be 2, oftentimes there'd be none. After the rollout of that vaccine, this is March of 2021, I could not work a shift without hearing a minimum of 8 code blues. And
the amount of patients that administered was the same pretty much? Because if, let's say, 100 patients were administered and there was a 1 code blue, and then it's like, let's say 100 patients were administered and 8 code blue, so it's the same 1%.
Yes.
So
roughly, yes.
The same.
And in addition to that, I had my colleague on the front lines who was doing the administrations telling me, corroborating, yes, I'm also seeing 8 to 12 code blues per day. But in addition to that, so I want to tie this back to the conversation about drug side effects and our failure in reporting. Okay, so she was witnessing, I was witnessing, both of us independently contacted our management and said, hey, we're seeing a dramatic increase in drug side effects or code blues. We need to document this so that it can be recorded and researched, because that's our job.
Right.
Our job is to note when something has changed and then put the information out so that scientists can do the research.
Science.
So what we were both told independently, so my friend, she was actually told, if you report these side effects, we will fire you. Okay? She was told that if she reported the increase in code blues, if she went on to VAERS, okay, so Vaccine Adverse Events Recording System, and reported those adverse reactions, she would be fired. I was told, so I was told by my doctors, the doctors who I worked with, and the management who oversaw my floors. I was told, no, we can't report those because we cannot prove that they are being caused by the vaccines. So it didn't matter that there was a direct correlation. So all these patients who were having these code blues and the anaphylactic shock and all the other, I can get into the details of what I saw, because they were all the same. So I heard this from my manager. So in June of 2021, my manager approached me at the beginning of a shift. I remember the day very well. He walked up to me, and he was a good friend. He'd worked with me. He'd actually worked with my mother. My mom was an ICU nurse for 43 years as well. And I loved the guy. He was a great guy. but he approached me at the beginning of a shift. I came in for a day shift and I was going to work a double that day because every shift I worked after March of 2021 was a double, basically, because we were having such an increase in patient admissions.
Not in 2020, but in 2021.
In 2020, I was being canceled and sent home because there were so few patients that the hospital didn't need staff. And because I was in graduate school, I took those options.
This is Bay Area.
Correct.
Kaiser.
Correct.
Huge hospital.
Huge hospital.
But we've been told on TV
Yes.
that hospitals are packed.
Yes. So this is another one of the reasons. So besides the hospital protocols, so the hospital protocols were for COVID. We went over that. They made no rational sense. I told you 2 of the factors. There were more. The medication, the antiviral that they were giving, remdesivir, they've changed the name of it since then. But that medication, it's so insane when I talk about, I'm just like, how could we do this? That medication had a 53% death rate in clinical trials.
53.
53. So what they did is they reformatted it. They lowered the dose, and then they did a new clinical trial so they could try and show that it was safe and effective for COVID patients. So it didn't kill as many people with the COVID clinical trials as it did with the Ebola clinical trials. But get this, that medication, the reason, so in the Ebola clinical trials where they used remdesivir, that drug had a 53% death rate. All those patients died from, guess what? 2 conditions. Liver failure and renal failure. Do you know what all my patients from COVID were dying from? They were recovering from COVID, and then they were dying from liver failure or renal failure. So that was another thing that really woke me up. So that's more along the lines of the protocols and
So
how...
you treated one, what caused the other problem?
What's that?
So you treated COVID?
So that could be argued as well. So in medical school and in nursing school, both of us, all of these practitioners are told that you do not administer an antiviral more than 48 to 72 hours post symptom onset, because the risks of side effects from antivirals outweighs the benefit. So COVID patients, right? Remember, we were all being told, go home, do nothing.
Right.
Okay, so that was the first crime against humanity. Never in the history of medicine has a doctor ever told a patient to go home and do nothing. Never. Go home, take Tylenol, take high-dose vitamin C, there were a whole slew of things. Do some respiratory cleanouts, right? Right? Okay, so that is what every ethical doctor for the whole history of medicine does when we have patients who are sick, regardless of what they're sick with. You treat the symptoms. So patients weren't, the reason I bring that up is because patients weren't coming into the hospital because they were told to go home and hide until you couldn't breathe anymore. And then once you can't breathe, then you come into the hospital and we'll treat you, okay? So by the time they got to the hospital, most of them were between 8 and 10 days post-symptom onset, which is so far outside of the window for administering an antiviral. So we're only supposed to give an antiviral in the first 3 days. Now we got people coming in 8 to 10 days. The virus is gone. The reason that they were going into respiratory distress was because of the inflammation that we were talking about earlier. Because the virus, that spike protein, had caused so much cellular damage. The body was so inflamed that their lungs were shutting down. So they were in respiratory distress. They weren't able to oxygenate because of the spike protein's inflammatory damage on the system. They didn't need an antiviral. They needed steroids. They needed high doses of vitamin C. They needed supportive measures, and they weren't getting that. They were getting remdesivir, which had a clinical study proof of causing organ failure. And it's known not to administer after 3 days post-symptom onset. So there were all of these reasons why we weren't supposed to be doing any of the things that the COVID protocols were telling us to do, but we were being forced to do them. So the hospital didn't do these protocols. The federal government would revoke funding. The hospital doctors would become under review for not following the best practice protocols. So we all had our hands tied. And I give that to my colleagues. We did have our hands tied. There was a level of this to where my colleagues really felt forced to do what they were being told to do. And that's the sad part about the medical system, is that we no longer have practitioners who are able to access and utilize their education to do what they were trained to. They're just being pushed in as bots to do what they're told. So that's what went
Even
down.
if it goes against science.
Well, yeah, and it did. And it's funny because they'll say that it didn't, and they'll say that they have the science, but I analyzed the science that they were trying to push on us. And then I saw the other science that they were trying to hide from us. And they were not following the science from day one. But yeah, so the side effects, so the vaccine side effects, we were talking about what I was seeing in terms of side effects. So my manager, Tom, he walked up to me one morning. It was right around like June 23rd or so of 2021. And the poor guy, I mean, he looked like he hadn't slept in like 3 months, and he probably hadn't, because we were all working doubles because the hospitals had been so slammed. We got an increase in patient admissions, those code blues. All of that started within 1 week of the rollout of the COVID vaccine to the public. Okay, so my hospital was empty. We had canceled elective surgeries. That's part of the reason it was empty. Everyone was sent home. They were canceling the staff members. And then they rolled out these shots. And we had, starting in the winter of 2020, 2021, we started getting increases in patient admissions. And then it hit a spike. So by the first week of March of 2021, I was receiving 3 to 4 phone calls a day from my staffing department begging me to come to work every single day. What does that mean? They were desperate for staff. Why? Okay, so Tom clarified for me why in June. So after 3 months of that, me getting phone calls 3 to 4 times a day to come to work because the hospitals were so slammed that they couldn't staff the hospitals enough. Tom approached me and he said, Gail, this hospital has had 3 times more admissions than we've ever had since the hospital opened their doors. Okay? So all of that started with the rollout of those shots. Now, I just happened to have gotten lucky. I was reviewing the Pfizer clinical data trial, and I thought, I don't want to take this shot because I'm seeing what they're not saying in the conclusion, which is there were more injuries in the vaccination group than there were in the control group. So even though they had less deaths related to COVID, which is actually disputable, there was like 1 COVID death in the vaccinated group and 2 in the unvaccinated group. I mean, it's like, that's not clinically significant. But they had a significantly higher risk for cardiovascular injuries in the vaccinated group. So they didn't put that information in the conclusion of the data, which is what most of your doctors are going to read. They didn't put that in there. That was tucked away in the data. So if you didn't actually go through and analyze the paper, you wouldn't actually know. And it wasn't just the cardiovascular. So they had higher risks for cardiovascular incidences. They had higher risks of neurological incidences. And they had higher risks for, I believe it was liver and kidney damage. Higher rates, yes, that's what it was. Liver, ALT, AST, liver failure. And there were other things too. So on the list in the Pfizer data, there was, they analyzed like 30 different incidences of injuries amongst the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So anyways, I saw that paper, and then I recognized I'm a woman of childbearing age. And then I got sick with COVID in November of 2020. So I just was like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get my blood tested. I mean, we have Dr. Fauci on camera in 2012 saying, oh, if you have natural immunity, don't go get the flu shot because natural immunity is better than a vaccine. We try to use the history of vaccines is like, oh, let's try to make a substance that will replicate natural immunity without having to actually get sick. That's the purpose of a vaccine. we've known since the dawn of medicine that natural immunity is better than a vaccine. A vaccine is created to try, and they usually don't, try to replicate the positive effects of natural immunity. So I went and got my blood tested in January of 2020, and sure enough, I had natural immunity, robust. 2021. That's right. January 2021. So I got COVID in November. I had my blood test in January of 21. So that's when they started offering the shots to the staff at the hospital, was January. And I said, well, I already have natural immunity, so I'm going to postpone because I'm a woman of childbearing age. I don't need this vaccine. I'm just going to wait and watch. I saw the clinical trial data. It did not impress me. And then I started to watch what happened in the hospital setting. And I had a hard time accepting it. I have to be honest, Apollo. I was just I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it took me months to really integrate because I didn't realize that my colleagues would cover up the side effects the way that they did. I didn't realize that they would have told myself and my colleagues that we can't report, don't report. I mean, those are unethical.
But that's a crime.
It is. They are crimes. And at the end of the day, that's what drove me out. That was the, after that conversation with my manager, Tom, where he said, we've had a threefold increase. I went home from work that day, and that's actually really when it hit me. I mean, I was like trying to grapple with all this stuff. I was like, why? What is going on? Every day I'm seeing all these things. They don't add up. This doesn't make sense. And then after that conversation with Tom, I was like, threefold increase in hospitalizations directly associated to the rollout of these shots. These shots are killing people. The protocols are killing people. And I can't ethically engage in this any longer. It's too much. I can't do it. And so...
and it was summertime.
It was,
It's not the flu season, quote unquote, when people get sick, usually in October to November.
That was the other reason why I made the decision to step away, because my mom and I, my mom had been working in the hospital since 81. I had been there. So between 1980 and 2020, okay, that's 40
years.
40 years. Neither one of us had ever seen a hospital fill in the summer. They're always empty. The hospitals fill in the winter. That's when people get sick. And now all of a sudden we have hospitals filling in the summertime. So there was just so many different red light signals that there were violations taking place. Things were not right. I was not going to put up with it any longer. And unfortunately, that also led to me losing my nurse practitioner as well.
Did you ask your manager why do they do cover-ups?
Yes, I did. I asked them, why aren't we reporting these side effects that are clearly a link? And they would, so all of them, every time I brought this up, people's eyes would glaze over and they would try to change the subject because they didn't want to talk about it. Because if they talked about it, they would lose the argument with me, and then they'd be forced to evaluate their decisions, and they couldn't do it. And again, I think a lot of this comes back to fear. And so, so that's when I ended up actually going to the city board of Sonoma County. I went and spoke to all of our city officials publicly, and I told them what was happening in the hospitals, and I informed everybody about the things that nobody wanted to report on, and I got silenced there too. People didn't want to talk about it. They were too afraid.
How did they silence you?
Well, they covered up all of my stories. They refused to report. They started labeling us. I just got clumped in with all the rest of my colleagues around the country who were blowing the whistle. We were being called crazy conspiracy theorists. We were being told that we're spreading this dangerous misinformation.
But you've got data on your hands.
That's correct.
How can that be a conspiracy theory?
Well, I don't think that matters when you have people that are so afraid and so singularly focused on what they're being told and how correct it is. I mean, humanity's been doing this for thousands of years, haven't we?
Doing what? Lying to the public?
Yeah, when there's an agenda
to the whole
at play.
world?
Well, I mean, they burned all of the witches. They burned all the herbalists alive in, what was it, the late 1800s. They called all of these natural healers witches. They burned them alive. So the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers did this in early 1900s. This was actually in my nursing history book. So in the early 1900s, the Rockefellers, who were the largest petroleum producers in the world, right? They were being charged to get rid of their petroleum byproducts. They were getting, like, the government was saying, you can't dump these. We have to pay to properly dispose of these petroleum byproducts. This guy, richest guy in the world at that time, so smart. What he did instead was he partnered with the very first pharmaceutical company that was ever in existence. He bought up this guy because those medications, doctors were using these petroleum byproduct medications, and they were causing side effects. And the herbalists and the alternative medicine doctors, who had always been at the cutting edge of healing, they had many other more effective ways of treating illness and disease. So the petroleum byproduct pharmaceuticals, that industry was failing. So Rockefeller came in and he purchased these pharmaceutical companies, and then he purchased all of the news, the Post, right? The Post in the early 1900s, there's like a newspaper, all of the news outlets back at that time. And he began pumping propaganda about how alternative doctors were quacks and how the only way to treat people was with these pharmaceuticals. And he labeled all our alternative practitioners as quacks, and it totally worked.
And they did drugs from petroleum?
So yes, that's what pharmaceuticals are derived from. The derivative component of pharmaceuticals are petroleum byproducts. This is at least of the origins. I don't know exactly how that has stepped through into today, but back when Rockefeller purchased those companies, they were producing pharmaceutical drugs from petroleum byproducts. So he was able to avoid all of the fees from dealing with his waste, funnel that money into producing pharmaceuticals. He also partnered with a couple of the largest medical education platforms in the world at that time. It was...
He hired two brothers that did this report, Fleissner report,
yes.
Was it called?
Yes.
That they convinced everybody to do the hospitals nationwide.
Right. And they also bought up the educational institutions. The first, I was just writing about this and I'm blanking on the names, but there were two, the American Medical Association, they became the largest funder of the AMA back in the early 1900s, but also...
But if you produce drugs, you can't sponsor medical associations. You just can't.
Right. And that's why we're in the pickle we're in today, because that is what's happening, and it always has been. And they keep it quiet. They go through, side silent corporations so that people can't trace back the origins. But there are many books on this, and they are correct. It was in my nursing history book. It was like an assigned reading book for me. This is like 2011. I was assigned this book called The History of Nursing, and they talked about the Rockefellers and the way that they propagandized alternative medicine and pushed the pharmaceutical agenda. So here we are. I mean, it's still I would say that these are all like very honest and true contributing factors to why we're in this position we're in today, because we have these industries who are making profit and they're being subsidized and funded by, handshake backdoor deals, partnered with, more people looking to make money. And at the end of the day, the medical model has really been kidnapped by a business model where they don't care about your well-being. They care about making profit. And that's what drove me out. because I can't do that.
But one can ask how much enough is enough, but at the same time, right now they can't just pull the trigger or say stop, because they have to admit that we were basically
Correct.
bamboozling the whole nation for, let's say, 100 years, for 50 years.
Yeah. And that's why I have such a hard time in communicating this, not just with my colleagues, but also with the public, because people, and that's actually why I've stepped into leadership and ethics, coaching and education, specifically for this reason. Because what I've come to understand is that until we correct the character failures in humanity that have taken place to get us to this point, we're not going to be able to grapple with these questions on a mass scale, because people can't emotionally, psychically, mentally handle the conversations, right? We're coming from places of fear. We don't have the courage to have the conversations, to honestly analyze the details, and to actually evaluate what has taken place. We don't have the courage to do it. Why? And I understand why, right? We've spent our entire lives, even for me, I spent my entire life getting to this point, and I've thrown it all away. What kind of person does that? You know, like that is a hard thing to do, and most people just aren't willing to do it. And so that's what, at the end of the day, what I really like to put into the foundations of this leadership coaching is, what have I gotten out of this and what have I lost? Okay, so what I've lost is my career and my, my background, the work that I did in medicine. All of that expertise, the career that I was building, I've lost that. What have I gained? I am free. I don't have to comply with their protocols anymore. More importantly, I've shown myself that I am of value enough to tell the truth no matter what the cost. And when you tell yourself that, when you communicate to yourself, I am not going to comply with ethical violations that harm my spirit. So when we lie, when we conceal, when we do these things, when we hide from the truth, it suffocates your being. You tell on a spiritual psychological perspective, you're telling yourself, I'm not worth it to tell the truth. I'm not valuable enough. My voice isn't loud enough. What I have to say doesn't matter. What I'm doing is not important. So I'm just going to do what everybody else is doing because that's what I'm being told to do. And this is why I like that homeschool background and why I like to bring that in, because I was raised with that inner strength to be able to look at my actions and be able to say, I don't care what other people think about the choices that I'm going to make. I'm going to do what's right, because if I don't honor that authentic voice within myself, A, I'm showing myself that I'm a coward. B, I'm showing my children that I'm a coward. What happens when we teach our children cowardice? We raise children into adults that are cowards. And how do you think we got here to where we are today? It's generational cowardice that's been propagandized into us over generations, through the school systems, through the indoctrination, parents, and also through the abuse. When parents abuse their children, you're degrading their soul, their individual spirit. I mean, of course, children need guidance, right? But we have all of these histories of the way that we treat our children that disempowers them. The public institutions disempower our kids at every turn. You have to raise your hand to go to the bathroom. If you're not good at reading or math, you're not worth, right. You're going to become a whatever on the streets, whatever story it is that they tell us. There are these small ways that we remove our children's autonomy and their ability to actually access and enter their full authentic being, the purpose. Why did we come here? Why are you here? Right? And those are the things that these conversations, at the end of the day, I don't think that there's any other way to move forward, because if we don't address those core foundational values, people can't have the conversation. You can't honestly have these conversations when people are defensive, fearful, or motivated by anything other than the truth. And even to take it a step further than that, it's like, what does it mean to care about the truth? It means to deeply value authentically engaging with the world from a place of love, deep love and respect. So there are these qualities, right, that if we don't have them, we can't have these conversations, because it's not going to go in the direction of positivity, because people are too shut down. So
the system grabbed us by the balls, by our cojones, and told us, if you're a teacher and you speak up, you're gonna lose your credential, right? You're not gonna work at our school. If you're a police officer, if you're gonna speak up about something you saw, you're gonna lose your pension. If you're a doctor, you're gonna lose your license.
that's right.
Basically, they're threatening us, and it's even applicable on the higher level. If you speak up publicly to the millions, we're gonna debank you, we're gonna deplatform you, we're gonna ban you on social media, we're gonna silence you.
We're going to arrest you and put you in jail. You shut it Reiner Fulmich. I mean, they make up charges, they make up claims against people who speak out, and they're not backed up by truth. They make up stories. If they don't like what you're doing, they'll do whatever they need to stop you from speaking. And that's another reason why my husband and I moved into an RV and we're traveling, because I don't want people to be able to find me. You know, I want to be able to feel, I have children, I have young children, like I don't want to put them at risk, but at the same time, I need to show them how to live authentically. So we've made a lot of sacrifices to do this work. And that's what I tell a lot of people. They're like, oh, well, you must be getting something out of this. I'm like, are you kidding me? I've done nothing but give. This has been a sacrifice of everything that we once held dear for to come out and tell the truth, because nobody wants to hear it. And so they've just taken it. They've taken it all. But that's okay, because at the end of the day, my worldly possessions mean nothing to me. And my soul and the outcome of the ethics and integrity that I teach my kids and that I move forward with, that's what matters. So that's another thing I'd love to share. The 10 years I worked in the hospital, I'm that kind of person. I'm a dog with a bone. Like, you can get that from me. Like, I read the papers. I don't just skim to the conclusion. And I was like that with my patients too. So I made it a...
And how big are the papers? Let's say 70 pages, 100 pages?
Yeah. Most of them were less than that, but sometimes I get my hands on papers like that. I would skim through some of it, and then I'd get to the places where I'd be like, oh, this is the important stuff, and then I'd read them carefully. Okay. But yeah, you know, it's still taking those deep dives.
Are you the person that reads all the terms and conditions?
Absolutely.
Before accepting, you do read the T&C?
Not with everything, with things that are important.
Okay.
And that's part of the critical thinking, right? You got to gauge, like, what are the important contracts that you really have to pay attention to? When it comes to any contract I sign with the government, I sure do.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Everybody should.
Yeah. Yeah. So applying that back to my patients, I want people to hear this, because it's really to the heart of the matter, is that when those 10 years I was working with patients, and I just made it like basically a need. I was like, okay, well, anytime I engage with a new patient, I really want to talk to them, and I really want to just figure out what it is that they discovered, because I'm dealing with people at the end of their life. They're all near death, and they have all had these life experiences. Like, what is it? Like, what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? What did you learn? So I would ask all my patients, can you tell me, please, like, give the youngster some wisdom. What are your life's biggest regrets and your biggest successes? And their eyes would always light up. It was always a wonderful conversation. But I got to glean a lot of wisdom from my patients over the 10 years of doing that. And I'll tell you, all of their answers were pretty much the same. And it's a lot of the guiding principles for why I've made these choices that I've made. Rarely did they remember their life's biggest successes. And if they did, they were like, well, yeah, I made this great decision. I invested in this company at this time, or, I usually that's what it was about, was business, their greatest successes. Their greatest failures were all the same too, but their greatest failures were far more impactful. Every single client I served would have something very similar to say about their biggest failures, and they were all along the lines of, I regret not taking the risk to step out and do what I knew was right, or that I knew I could do, or that could have potentially changed my life in that moment. So, for instance, most of the time it was, I wish I would have taken the time to spend with my children. When I had the opportunity, I didn't. I was working too much, and I missed their growing up. And then I didn't have the relationship with them that I wanted. Or I made mistakes with my partner. I prioritized my job or alcohol or whatever it was over the relationship with my wife. Another one was, I wish I should have gone on more vacations with my family, and I should have enjoyed life, or I should have taken the risk and tried to get that position. I should have started that business. I should have written that book. But all of them, all of their life experiences that they regretted had to do with not having the courage to step into their greater purpose, or their greater needs, or the things that they found the most value in life. And I think about that every day.
But if there is one thing that I could say about America, about the US and the citizens of the US, is it's you take the risks. The whole country is about taking risks, especially it started in 1776, right? We will not be conquered by you. We will not listen to a queen or a king, right?
And maybe that's why it was so easy for my patients to recognize that they're failures in taking those risks. I hear what you're saying, though, and I'll tell you,
America is about being bold.
it is
You're
about being
always bold.
But most of us are not bold.
You
We
mean the youngsters?
fantasize.
You mean the new generation?
No, my old patients who are all passing away. And I would argue, too, that even if we are bold, we're not bold enough, because we're still letting these companies and these private interests trample on our rights. We're still allowing fear-mongering and propaganda to take away our ability to live freely and to fully expand in the world.
But without us people, those companies are nothing. They're worthless. They're worth, let's say, $1 trillion just because we own the stocks and we believe that this company is worth $1 trillion. Without us, they're basically nothing. Piece of paper.
That's true. And I would say, too, though, that think of all the rights that have been removed from the American people even over the last 50 years. So that's kind of what has stemmed me into some of the other work that I'm doing now, is trying to get back our rights that we lost with, say, the Patriot Act, where people, there's all these infringements on freedoms related to travel and accessing your private data and surveillance, all these different systems of surveillance that they've implemented. But we really have become less free through a lot of these different actions that have taken place.
But did you become more safe? Because that's the question,
think so.
right?
Yes. Operating privately, I have become more safe. I've been able to use...
I mean, let's say with implementing the Patriot Act, did the country become safe?
No. There's data on that. I've seen it. The answer is no. They argue that it would, and that's why they did it. But then the actual outcomes were that no, it didn't really change anything.
So we moved here only a few years ago. A lot of people, a lot of folks that I talk to, they say America prior to COVID was a way different country. Is that true?
Yes, it is. We were much more carefree. We were much more industrious and productive. So here in California, at least during COVID, there was a massive shutdown of small businesses. So we become more of a corporately run country versus before COVID. There was a lot more emphasis on community-based living and supporting your community, living in community.
You mean not, let's say Walmart, but other stores, smaller
Right,
stores, not the
exactly.
Starbucks, but the family-owned cafes?
Correct. So a lot of those have shut down. A lot more money has been diverted more towards corporatization, which I don't think is good. I mean, that's one of the things I love about some of the European countries. You know, you just walk down the market on the corner and, you know, buy the vegetables from the farmers. And there are some things like that that we kind of are beginning to lose more access to. Everything here is mass farmed. They spray chemicals on our food.
No other option, almost no other option.
Correct.
So there are folks that are saying minimal wage has to be increased almost year over year, right? But what they don't realize is that big businesses, they can afford, let's say 25, 30, 40, even $50 per hour because they're worth billions upon billions, upon hundreds of billions of dollars. But smaller companies, family-owned cafes, stores, restaurants, they will never be able to afford, let's say, $30 per hour wage. It's impossible. They're going to shut down, and those big businesses are going to buy out those smaller businesses. They're going to become basically corporations.
Yeah.
The United States of corporations, not the states.
Right.
United States, not of America, but United States of corporations.
That's the impact of inflation, the hidden tax. And those corporations, most of them operate, you know, like you said, they have extremely intelligent business structures. And that's the thing that the small businesses don't have access to, is the funding to set up some of these business structures that protect and promote the well-being of their business. So that's part of what my husband and I have begun really starting to learn about, is how do you contract privately? How do you start getting access to a lot of these benefits that these corporations have that we generally can't get? And there are ways to do it. I mean, the big businesses do this, but we can too. And I don't think that those big businesses want us getting access to those skills, like how to protect ourselves from corporate impingements. I don't think they want us to learn that, but there are ways. So that's part of this, is, you know, with the intention of returning to foundational ethics, we have to be able to protect our communities. And so we have to begin to rediscover what are some of these tools that we can step into in order to protect our small businesses. They used us to build the country, and then the corporations came in with COVID and just did a sweep.
So, for example, we rent this apartment. Let's say it's $3,500 a month, right? But if I would love to own this apartment, though I can't because of this whole complex, and there are complexes upon complexes upon complexes here in the valley, you can't even own an apartment. They won't sell you. But if I would love to own this apartment, I would pay, let's say, $7,000 in mortgage. So it doesn't end up, I have to pay twice.
Correct.
So how do those companies can afford it, right? They pay for the banks, let's say.
They buy the properties outright.
So this is the incentive for everybody to become a rent nation, not to own anything, because I can't afford $7,000 a month for mortgage.
Right.
It's impossible.
It's true. And so, yeah, California, since COVID, I think there's been, I don't remember the numbers, but there's been a mass exodus of people from California.
For the first time in history of the state.
And that's because of the inflation. People cannot afford to live here and pay their bills. That wasn't why I left. But so this is one of the reasons why I think I had so much the capacity to come out and blow the whistle. Because my husband and I, we owned real estate in Northern California, and I was not reliant on my paycheck. If they wanted to fire me, it wasn't going to impact us because we had stability. We had financial stability through real estate. And so that's not why we left. We left for other reasons because of the trauma. mostly because of the trauma. Because and that's the thing, it's like I can't really judge my colleagues for not wanting, I mean, I do, but I have sympathy for them, because the mental weight of having to look into the eyes of yourself and realize that you were administering protocols that killed people, and that you were witnessing and observing and caring for people who were dying from all these interventions, including the vaccines. That's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, and it takes the kind of strength of character and the type of self-analysis. I mean, forgiveness. I had to forgive myself. Yeah, I did that. And
for speaking up, or for not speaking up earlier?
For not speaking up earlier. For going along as long as I did.
Well, I believe people don't speak up because they think that they can't change a thing, because the companies are too big.
I didn't speak up.
Corporations.
I didn't speak up because I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Yeah,
I couldn't even process it. I was like, this can't be real. I have to be missing something. I must be mistaken.
Right.
There is no way that all of these things could be happening, that we could be blocking access to drugs that would save these people's lives, that we could be, forcing the staff members to not document adverse events. Here's something else that your viewers should know. During COVID, when they first rolled out that vaccine, all of our systems in California, at least, hospitals use a documentation system called EPIC, EPIC. It's a charting system that we use to, keep records and communicate with each other in the hospitals. And the EPIC system, when they rolled out the COVID shots, the EPIC system gave us an updated chart for COVID, for patients with COVID. And of the 3 hospitals in the San Francisco Bay Area, the major hospitals, there's Kaiser, Sutter, and Kaiser, Sutter, Alta Bates, and St. Joseph's. Those are like the 3 main hospital systems. All 3 of them used Epic. And there were 2 different Epic platforms that were released to the staff for COVID patients. So if a patient was if a patient was diagnosed with COVID, the doctor would write the orders to pull up the chart for COVID. And we had one of 2 systems between those 3 hospitals. We had a system through Epic that either gave you a chart that was automatically documented the patient as unvaccinated. So if you are diagnosed with COVID, you're unvaccinated. And then they didn't teach us how to change the vaccination status in that chart. So every single patient who got a COVID diagnosis was automatically charted as unvaccinated. Okay. The other hospital, I think it was St. Joseph, was the other hospital. They had Epic as well. Their charting system for patients who were diagnosed with COVID gave you 2 options. You could either document that, it gave you a little drop-down bar for vaccination status. You could either document that the patient was unvaccinated or that their vaccination status was unknown. So from the rollout of those shots, I was working on the COVID floors on and off. I am certain that roughly 50 to 70% of the patients admitted to my hospital with COVID were vaccinated. They had at least one COVID vaccine.
Right. And they still got COVID.
But more importantly, the charts documented them as unvaccinated.
Right.
So then we were pushing this false agenda to the public and using that to coerce people into taking the shots, because the media and the news outlets were all saying every single patient being admitted to the hospital was unvaccinated, and that was never true. It was never true. I was taking care of those patients myself. I was looking at the notes, right? So even if even if that patient was transferred to me from a different unit, if they were there and at some point they were diagnosed with COVID, I could see that they were all being charted as unvaccinated. And then I could see in the notes that the staff were like, oh no, this patient is actually vaccinated, but but the chart would still populate as unvaccinated. So that was a huge propaganda scheme to manipulate the public into believing lies.
How did they manage to pull this off in 2020? I mean, it's like not 1920s, not 1950s.
I think it was all through fear. And that's, again, why we come back to the homeschooling and the working in Africa. Like, it matters. So here's what I've learned through this coaching work that I'm doing now, where I'm guiding people with development of leadership and ethics, is that, and we've got studies on this that go back to the 40s and 50s. The population is made up of a bell curve of people who have the innate ability to challenge opposition, and those who don't. It's on a scale, right? It's on a bell curve. There's, a majority of the population, they'll realize that something is wrong, but they won't talk about it. And then there's about 5% of the population who they know what's wrong and they will talk about it. And then there's about, another like 30% below there that they have no idea. They're just believing what they're told. Like, they're not asking questions. They're just going along. So I was not in that 5%. I was not born that person. I was born in the middle. The only reason that I developed those skills of challenging is because I learned the skills to do it. I learned how to utilize tools for challenging authority and for standing strong, right? And a lot of that comes from homeschooling. The rest of it comes from Africa. There are some other experiences I had in my younger life where I was put in a position where I could do right or wrong and get the outcomes. Or like in high school, I could go along and, base my value and self-worth on the acceptance of my peers, but I couldn't really do that because I was in homeschool, so I was forced, And then in Africa, like, I was forced to really analyze, what do I have to be afraid of here? And it helped me develop the skills and exercise the muscles, right? Because that's what this is. These are muscles. These are skills that we have to learn. We have to teach our children how to have courage. And that's the thing. It's like with my colleagues even, I look at them and they're like, oh yeah, I'm ethical and I'm doing the right thing because this. And it's like, well, you think that you are, but then when the rubber hits the road, you realize you're not. And I don't think they even realize. Most of my colleagues, I don't think they realize that their ethics have failed and that they're not practicing ethically. But that's part of why I'm coming back to this as a foundation, is that if we don't start to have these conversations about what drove this, why did people go along? Why do we have all of these practitioners, and all these scientists just doing what they were told? If we don't get down to answer that first question of how did this happen, we're never going to be able to move forward and prevent this from happening again. So that's a big part of the work that I'm doing now. I'm doing work in leadership and ethics.
Do you think they can pull it off right now in 2025 once again? The same stuff?
That's a good question. I would like to say they don't, and I am an eternal optimist. So I will continue to remain in that position of no. I don't think that they could pull it off. But just like with COVID, I was wrong there too. I couldn't believe what they pulled off in that situation. I couldn't believe what my colleagues were going along with, because like I said, we would have those conversations in the break room or at the nurse's station, and they knew. A percentage of them knew. Probably 30% of my colleagues knew that we were committing crimes against humanity, that we were violating our oath. And they just didn't have the courage to do anything about it. They were afraid. Some of my good friends, they were great people. But they were afraid to do anything about it because they couldn't lose their jobs, because then they couldn't pay their mortgage, and then, they couldn't pay their student loans. So
You see, I couldn't believe that they pulled this off with so many odd things like the dancing nurses, right? That's what I asked you on WhatsApp, right? You were a nurse. Have you ever seen like someone
Never.
dancing? What was that all about?
I
It
have
wasn't
no
only
idea.
in the US, it was around the globe.
It's crazy.
So nurses were working 24/7, right? Without any holidays. And then they are just dancing.
Well, no, that's why because all those dances came out in 2020. Remember how I told you the hospitals were dead?
But they told us that they have to put
Yes.
those containers in New York on a ship
No.
because of the dead bodies.
Yeah, no.
They had to put the dead bodies in the bags because the morgues were full.
I know nurses.
Who are all those people that died?
Yeah, I know nurses who worked in all those hospitals. There's a couple of whistleblowers from the hospitals at the epicenter of New York who will tell you exactly what I'm telling you, which is that there was never an uptick in patients in 2020. It wasn't until the rollout of the shots that we became inundated with patients.
So let's say you work in the hospital X, and you sit at home because you were called not to come to work because it's empty, and now you watch CNN, Fox, you name it, and you see that hospital X, your hospital that you work at, they say that this is full capacity, people are dying.
Yes, they did that.
Why didn't any nurse or doctor say, guys, I work at this is BS. I'm from New York, literally.
Yeah.
I am a doctor at this hospital.
There were some of us, that small percentage, those people who had those courage and ethics skills, we were speaking up from the get-go. And we were all being silenced, censored, called conspiracy theorists, and being told that we were spreading dangerous misinformation. Every single one of us.
But I work at the hospital.
Yes.
You're saying you're full, and I'm at home.
I had that conversation with my mother-in-law. Then she stopped talking to us for 2 years
Why?
because she thought that I was
Lunatic?
spreading dangerous misinformation.
But you were on the front lines.
Yes,
And
I
she was sitting at home watching CNN.
Yes, she was.
And she was right.
And then she stopped talking to me for 2 years.
That's insane.
My family.
Did she acknowledge that she was wrong now?
She has not.
She still thinks that
She's
it's
still-
so dangerous and that you were wrong?
She still thinks that I was wrong.
But what about the data?
Luckily, the rest of the family has come around. My husband's father and his sister now, although his sister, she developed a cardiovascular injury
Because of the shot?
from her booster, and she was being hospitalized. So three out of three of his immediate family members all developed side effects from the shot. His dad developed an autoimmune condition. His mom and his sister both developed cardiovascular injuries. And his
And they
dad...
still don't believe it.
So his dad... so all three of those happened within about... between 1 and 3 weeks of one of their shots. His dad now, I think, at least internally,
He knows.
is entertaining the idea that it was from the shots. His mom and his sister, they won't even talk about it with us. They're incomplete. So his sister, she came up to my husband, and my husband is concerned. You know, he loves his sister,
course.
and he says, you know, are you okay? What's going on? And she says, oh, you know, I've been in the hospital on and off nonstop for the last 2 months. But the doctor told me that there's no way that it could have been caused by the COVID vaccine. So we know it's not that. So how did the doctor even say that? How did he know it? How did she believe it? So her cardiac injury, I think, was within less than a week of her booster. It was right after. It was very closely correlated to the shot that she took.
So you were healthy all your life.
Yeah,
Then
she-
something happens, and then you got this cardiac problem.
She's 40.
And you do not connect the dots.
She's 40 years old.
She's young.
She's young, and she developed a cardiovascular injury.
That's insane how people cannot connect
So,
those
and
dots.
again, I do honestly believe that all of this comes back to people being afraid to acknowledge the truth, okay? Because then they would have to admit, A, that they were lied to, B, that they accepted those lies, and see that now that they're permanently damaged from them or that their families are damaged.
But no more. I was lied to no more.
But
That's
that
it.
takes so much mental strength. And that's why I'm doing this coaching work, because people have to learn how to have these foundational, courageous, ethical leadership skills in order to be able to even just be honest with themselves about what has happened. They can't even acknowledge it because they don't have the strength of character that's required to even access the possibility in their mind.
So New York was at the same time. New York, two events happened at the same time. New York was on a shutdown, and people were dying, ships, body bags, right, containers. And at the same time in Sweden, the country was wide open, no body bags, no dying,
Yes.
no catastrophe.
Correct.
How is it possible? In the
Propaganda. So let's talk about that. So in Sweden, their public was not being propagandized the way ours was. So all of the doctors that I talked to who worked in New York, doctors and nurses alike, they will both tell you that the reason that we had an uptick, okay, there's two reasons, an uptick in deaths in New York, A, was because of the fear-mongering and propagandization of the public. People were going into anxiety disorders, right? When you're stressed out and you have that much cortisol,
Their immune system goes down.
yes, they become susceptible to everything. Not only that, but their stress, their stress loads, their anxiety disorders, everything about their bodily functions goes into decline because they're so stressed out that their body can't manage. Okay, that's A. B, the second thing that happened in New York, the mayor of New York forced skilled nursing facilities to accept patients who were sick back into their facilities. So they were basically sending people with COVID, with whatever this sickness was, back into a skilled nursing facility, which is full of the most at-risk patient population that we can even discuss. I mean, all of the patients at skilled nursing facilities are at risk. So then you send sick people into those confined spaces, and then, of course, everyone gets sick because you're inoculating the whole organization. So yes, New York had an uptick in elderly illness and disease, but all of the doctors and nurses that I talked to who worked there said that it is absolutely the fault of the administrators of the city of New York because they forced sick people into the facilities full of people who were already high risk.
But that was a comedy. They were laughing at us, saying ships for dead bodies. Ships, huge city of New York, they can't handle the bodies, dead bodies, so they have to build a ship to bring the ship to store the dead bodies. Guys, do you remember that?
They weren't even full. Nobody was on those ships.
It's like from a movie from the future.
Yeah, it was a show.
It was a show.
They did that to, again, create fear, to make the public afraid, to scare people into compliance, and to enforce control.
Let's say a person is watching right now that is vax injured. Can you heal from it?
So I have some news on that. It's been a very difficult road, again, because all of the doctors that are trying to treat injuries, first of all, like with my sister-in-law, most doctors are just gaslighting these patients and telling them, oh, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you, or there's no way that this could have been caused by the vaccine.
Or it's a long COVID.
Right. Or they're calling it long COVID. Okay. So we've got all of these issues with the public practitioner's face on, hey, like, clearly you guys aren't being honest with yourselves, let alone your patients. So we're having people that are just, they can't get access. So the few doctors who will talk about this, there's doctors doing research on curative protocols for vaccine injuries. And I know all of them. And there's some great groups out there. Some of the problems are that this is it's extremely expensive because none of this is covered by insurance. So all the coverage that is through insurance, they're gaslighting the patients and telling them that they don't have vaccine injuries. So then you have to go pay out of pocket. So we're talking potentially huge bills. But
Right, like what? For example, a month. What kind of amount of money a month?
$1,000, $2,000 a month.
Okay.
So someone like Dr. Pierre Corey, he's doing a lot of treatment for vaccine injuries. And so is Dr. Peter McCullough. They both have access. There's doctors, Dr. Mary,
Yeah, I know. It starts with the A's, S.
Yeah, there's many. There are many of these doctors who are...
She's from Texas, right?
Yes.
The one.
There are many of these doctors who are having extreme success, at least with bringing down the side effect impact on your life. So the problem, here's the big problem with the injuries from these vaccines, is that these were not normal vaccines. They don't just put spike protein into your blood. What they do is they put an RNA that enters into your cell and reprograms your cells to present the spike protein. So when you think about what that means on a physiological level, even if we remove the spike proteins out of that person's circulation, their cells are going to continue to replicate that RNA, and they're going to continue to teach and create spike protein to present in the blood. So
For life?
these doctors, yes. So these doctors that do all of this research on, hey, these are vaccine injured, how are we going to help these people? They can remove the spike proteins. So that's what a lot of people are doing. They're going through treatments that detox the body from spike protein. But 6 months later, there's more spike protein in the blood again. And that's because of the RNA, because of the platform of these vaccines. They're not vaccines, they're gene therapies. They're therapeutics that retrain our body's cells to present a foreign protein that we've never, had to experience before. So that's why the bodies are constantly in... that's why we're seeing all of these people having autoimmune disorders. Because when you have a body's system that's constantly presenting a spike protein, which causes inflammation, right? The highest rate of inflammation I'd ever seen in the hospital as a practitioner. Now your body's creating that protein and it's constantly circulating. So we have all these patients in low-grade inflammatory responses who are developing all these autoimmune conditions. Cancer is a big one. They had a couple of the most prominent cancer doctors in the United States from University of Chapel Hill down in South Carolina, University of South Carolina, Chapel Hill. They came forward in front of the Senate and of South Carolina and showed them the data on how and why these vaccines are creating cancer. It's actually, so the reason behind it is that the vaccines were contaminated with DNA. So the way that you create an mRNA vaccine is you use a DNA strand, and then you use that DNA strand to create RNA, and then you're supposed to pull out the DNA. So that's what they did in the clinical trials, but that's not what they did when they released this to the public. So there's another doctor, Dr. Rose. She's from Canada. She's done a ton of groundbreaking research on this RNA, DNA replication, analyzing the clinical trials data versus the vaccines when they were released. Dr. Jessica Rose. She's got some phenomenal data on the truth about how and why these vaccines are causing cancer and autoimmune conditions. But so this is a failure and why we're struggling so much to develop, cures for vaccine injury, because when your body just continues to replicate because of this RNA, we have a hard time actually flushing it out. So I stumbled on a couple of doctors here in the United States that have created a homeopathic protocol that actually does reverse the RNA amplification in the cells. So
Really?
yes, there's a homeopathic protocol. It can only be administered through the assistance of a practitioner. You have to have somebody licensed who can get it for you. But it helps with long COVID because it pulls all the spike protein out. But B, it actually stops the replication of the spike protein by resetting the cells of the immune system. So that's what homeopathy does. It's basically, that's how it gets you to stop being sick in pretty much every incident, is it resets the system. It's basically like reset to the industry settings, right? That's how homeopathy works. And there's this incredible doctor out of Canada who created this protocol for vaccine injuries from COVID that actually does this reset on all systems to stop the replication of the spike protein.
What are those pills, IVs?
It's homeopathic pellets. So it's so easy. It's you take 4 little pellets, homeopathic pellets, under the tongue once a day, 1 day per week. So, I mean...
And they're made of what?
They're little sugar pills with teeny tiny little amounts of homeopathic remedies, very specific to...
Remedies, plant-based
yes.
something? Okay.
Exactly. And it's homeopathic medicine. So I
don't know much about it.
Yeah, it's like I was saying, homeopathy is kind of like a mirror. Because we use such trace amounts of plant protein, it's like what I do with tuning forks. So we use frequencies. So that's what homeopathy is. That's what acupuncture is. That's what biofield tuning is. We're using a subtle frequency to basically stand as a mirror to your body and to show your body like, hey, this is what you're doing. You're out of alignment here. And then your body can use that frequency or that subtle homeopathic frequency in this case to recognize, oh, look what's out of alignment. I can see in this mirror here that my cells shouldn't be replicating this spike protein. I'm going to go ahead and stop doing that.
But this is science, or this is, let's say, ancient books?
No, it's science. So that
even frequencies is science.
Correct. It's quantum physics.
Why it's not implicated, let's say, the hospitals?
Right. So that's another great question. And again, this comes back to money. The pharmaceutical industry that owns the medical system in the United States, they don't want people healing. They're using pharmaceuticals as a Band-Aid treatment. It creates a permanent customer. You're giving someone a pill that they have to take for the rest of their lives to numb a symptom instead of cure the root cause. These frequencies, this work I do with frequency healing, it's a curative modality. It stops the dysfunction in the body so that you don't have to be sick and take pills anymore.
Any proofs of that? Of help?
Yeah, we've got clinical trials specifically with anxiety, with biofield tuning. It was given to 60 some odd patients. All of them were on medications for anxiety. 100% of them saw a significant reduction in their anxiety symptoms. And I don't remember the percentage, but it was over 50. I think it was near 70% of them were able to get off of their anxiety meds altogether. So yes, in terms, they're small clinical trials because we are funding them, right? We don't have pharmaceutical companies funding these studies. But even with case reports, I mean, if you go on and research biofield tuning, you're going to find incredible results. I myself have experienced incredible results from biofield tuning. That's why I went to become a practitioner, because it really changed my life.
So you want to tell me homeopathy and frequency healing works, and they can say, let's say, heal some diseases, but at the same time we're being, excuse me my French, being fucked by big pharma just to make them money?
Right. So I didn't used to believe all of that. I used to think
it's
that
hard to
all of this was
comprehend.
conspiracy theories. When I was a nurse working for Kaiser in graduate school, I mean, I really was just a normal girl married to an awesome dude, and we had 2 kids, and like I was just the like most normal like the American dream liver that you could think of. And then after I left my job and we started traveling and I started doing all this advocacy work, do you know how many people I met who they themselves or their partners were targeted and destroyed for curing cancer?
Excuse me?
While I was traveling around the United States, going and speaking publicly about what was happening in the hospital, I met practitioners from all over the United States who are working in alternative modalities of healing, curative medicine. I met, in that time, about 18 months, I met 6 different practitioners who either they themselves or their partners were targeted by the pharmaceutical industry. They were threatened. Some of them died. And some
Like
of
what,
them were
poisoned?
a lot of them were suspicious suicides.
Okay, as usual.
And then a couple of them were imprisoned for fraudulent charges that didn't exist.
Like what?
One of them was in prison for tax evasion, which it was created. The guy has no idea how. They set him up somehow. They set him up to look like he was committing tax fraud, but he has no idea.
For millions or thousands of dollars?
They do this with crimes against children too. So I know another guy who had videos planted on his computer.
Child porn.
Yes. A practitioner who was curing cancer. They didn't want him to continue working because his work was changing the world. So they set him up. And this is not the first. So that I used to believe that these were all conspiracy theories. And then I sat across the table from these people and looked at them in the face as they told me what happened.
Any of those people were MDs?
Yes, absolutely.
MDs.
Most of them
Medical
were.
doctors.
As a matter of fact, every single one.
So they're not just some
Every
kind of
single one of those
lunatics or hippies.
No, they were curing cancer. And the pharmaceutical industry didn't want wind of that getting out to the public because they were making waves. That's one of the things too. Now I've learned that there's clinics in Mexico, Tijuana. People go there to go to these clinics and stay there for a month to cure their cancer, because we actually can cure cancer without radiation and chemotherapy. And that's another thing I learned while I was in my NP program is that actually it can be debated that 70% or more of the deaths that we call cancer deaths
Because
are
of
actually deaths
chemotherapy?
from chemotherapy and radiation poisoning. So, and that's just what the data shows. What the actual truth is, I would have to get more into that. But again, these are things that people don't want to talk about. The pharmaceutical industry and the media keep them hidden from us.
Is chemo expensive?
Oh, yeah.
Do they charge a lot?
It's a huge burden. And it's all covered by insurance.
Yeah,
It's
right,
part of the insurance scheme. Yeah. And so they do this, they kidnap these kids. So if your kid gets diagnosed with cancer, the hospital has the right to remove your authority as a guardian. If you say, I don't want my child to have chemo and radiation, they have the right to take you to court, take away your jurisdiction over your child so that they can administer chemo and radiation. And they will do it. I work with a family who is in the midst of dealing with this right now. And I know many others.
Which state?
All over the United States. There's one in Pennsylvania. There's several in Texas. But it happens all over Massachusetts. I know.
So if parents do not want this treatment for their child, they're going to be stripped of the parental rights?
Correct.
And the children will be forced to take chemo or
Correct.
radiation?
They'll do it with any treatment. So I worked with a family here in California. The daughter was diagnosed with a rare kidney condition, and the family wanted to seek out some alternative treatments and kind of just lighten up on the treatment modalities that the hospital was recommended. The hospital took them to court, removed their parental rights, and forced the child to comply with what they had recommended.
What's then the result?
Luckily, I got involved with...
No, I mean, the girl is alive. She's fine?
So during that process, the mother contacted myself. I was able to get in contact with a doctor who could step in as an expert and take over primary care for that patient. So if you know the right attorneys and the right practitioners that can step in to start the process of advocacy, sometimes we can veer this case off into a better direction. And we did do that in this case here in California. It was, I believe 2 years ago now, Stanford Children's Hospital. The little girl was 4 at the time, and she barely made it out alive because they were killing her body with all the medications. They were using drug cocktails that A, had never been approved for children, and B, had never been approved to use in the cocktail forms that they were using. But the doctors, right, because the doctors, so here's something you need to understand. When you walk into a hospital and sign their consent form, you give up your rights. You can no longer decide, I don't want this or that medication. If they want to give it to you, they have the rights to do that. And that came down in a case 3 months ago. The jury sided with the pharmaceutical industry in the hospital. And there was a little girl that they killed in, I want to say it's Wisconsin. The case is Shara versus whatever that hospital was. You can look it up. She was an 18-year-old girl with Down syndrome. Her parents did not consent to some of the treatments that they were trying to give her in the hospital for COVID. The hospital gave them anyways, and then the hospital, without the family's consent, switched her to do not resuscitate.
What does it mean?
DNR, do not resuscitate. That means if you stop breathing or if your heart stops, they will not step in to try to revive you. So in that situation, they went against the consent of the family. They turned her into a DNR, and then they removed the machines that were keeping her alive, and she passed away. The jury ruled that the hospital, due to the contract that they had signed, had the rights to do that because the contract stated that you're no longer required to get informed consent from people once you sign that contract. So people,
that's in the contract when you sign, when you administer?
When you enter the hospital. When you enter a hospital as a patient and you sign their consent form, you give up your rights to consent.
Any hospital?
Every hospital. Now, most hospitals will still honor consent of the families because that's our ethical duty. But in this little girl's case, they did not. And it turned out that they didn't have to. So, and it's even more like that with children, because children are under the age of 18. They're not considered an adult able to make their own decisions. And the hospitals deem that they as practitioners have more authority than a parent in a scenario where the child's life is potentially in danger. The parent doesn't have the expertise to make decisions on the behalf of the child, so they will remove the rights of the parent and do whatever they see fit.
This tyranny.
It's tragedy.
I would say this is the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent.
Yes.
Being stripped of parental rights. They take away your kid and they treat him the way they want to treat it.
The families that I've worked with are extraordinarily traumatized to this day. The family, the child, they will never recover. It has a life-lasting impact on the families going through situations like this, which is why I always recommend that people understand, A, how to protect themselves contractually. So there are documents that you can sign and notarize. So these are things that you should have signed and notarized on hand in case an emergency happens, so that if you end up in emergency, you can present these documents to the hospital and let them know that you do not give consent. That's the other thing I would say
So
too.
you print
Do
out
not-
the special document when you getting administered?
Yes, in advance. Also, just do not sign the consent form at the hospital. You don't have to sign that form.
They will administer you anyways?
They will try, but without that consent form, they don't have the legal protection. And they're going to
But
try.
they will help you?
They will help you. Yes. They have to help you. In the United States, we have a law that states that any person who shows up at the hospital and needs help, the hospital needs to help them. The hospital is violating their legal jurisdictions if they don't.
Even if you don't have any insurance?
Correct.
Even if you're homeless,
Exactly.
immigrant, illegal, no, doesn't matter, right?
If you show up at the hospital and you need help, the hospitals need to help you. So you don't have to sign that contract. You don't have to. And they're going to manipulate you all they want to try and tell you that you do. But you really don't. And so, I mean, especially with children. So as an adult, you can sign that contract with all rights reserved. And you can also bring in some other notarized documents, and it will help to make sure that they don't remove your rights. But with children, because of, again, that relationship between, the minor and the doctor versus the minor and the parent, the state will give the doctor superior jurisdiction. So, and even in those scenarios, even not signing the contract may or may not protect you, because really it's a legal battle. And
well, I kind of can understand the state and the judges, because let's say there is a parent that brings
Correct.
the child and he has just to take antibiotics, and he says, no, we're not going to do that. And
right.
I get it.
Yes.
But still, there is like case upon case upon case. You have to see it, whether you truly need help or you don't.
Correct.
Or let's say I get administered to the hospital, and let's say in order to save your life, you're gonna have to cut off your leg in a week or two. So maybe I'm gonna see another doctor
Right.
to hear another opinion.
Yes.
Before me getting chopped my leg off.
Yes. So that's my advice to parents. If you ever get into a situation where you're in a hospital and you get any signals from the hospital that they don't want to honor your wishes as the parent, and find a middle ground, because this is what it always usually is. You're right. There are some circumstances where there are parents who are unfit, and in those circumstances, the state needs to take control of the situation potentially. But in most scenarios,
It's such a thin line.
yes, in most scenarios, what it actually is that the hospital doesn't really listen to the family. The doctors, they think that they know better, and so they stop listening to the families, and you lose that relationship of that trust relationship between the patients and the doctors, and they stop honoring each other's roles. And so if you ever get into that kind of a situation in a hospital, my best advice to you is to demand transfer. Find a reason, consult somebody who specializes in advocacy, find a reason, and just transfer to a different hospital. You have the right to request a transfer. The sooner you do it, the better. Okay. So here's where people need to understand. If you develop a reputation with that hospital as being a parent who doesn't want to do what the hospital is telling you to do, the hospital is going to tell all those other transferring hospitals, oh, this is just a bad parent who's uncompliant and all of this other stuff, right? So you're setting yourself up to enter into the next hospital with the same kind of reputation. So the best thing to do is to just very subtly and calmly try one time to assert your wishes as the parent. And if you think for certain that you know what's best and the hospital's not honoring, and again, seek expertise, right? Find a health advocate, Remnant Nursing, Remnant Healthcare. That's one of the companies that I work with that specializes in advocacy. And there are many others. You can get advocates for free even through a couple of advocacy organizations. I think they'll come up if you just Google them. I don't remember the names offhand now, but You can speak with a medical health advocate and just say, hey, this is what they're trying to do with my kid. Does that sound right? Or is there alternatives? And as long as you honor the doctors and don't pick fights with them, and you very delicately kind of tiptoe around the issues of trying to figure out whether they're going to respect you as the parent and guardian of that child, hopefully you can find your way through it. And if you notice signals that that's not going to happen, just immediately ask for a transfer before they can judge you, before they can start making up stories about how you are an unfit parent. Just ask for a transfer to a different hospital. Get a health advocate on your side to help you navigate the situation and see what we can do to, save the life of the child and prevent injury.
So I'm going to give you a short example. So my wife just delivered, and the first time she went to see LBGYN was in February, I want to say. So she picked up a doctor, and we show up. She had a consultation, and she goes out of the room, and she says, I was prescribed with the progesterone. I was like, why? Did he do any blood test? No. So, and the doctor comes out. I was like, did you prescribe the progesterone to my wife? He's like, yes. I was like, why? Well, just for no reason. I was like, we were not gonna take it. Yeah, you don't have to take it if you don't want to take it. But why? Why would you prescribe hormone when you didn't even run any tests?
Especially for a second baby. So sometimes they'll do that to prevent miscarriage if the mom has signals that she might have a miscarriage. But again, you're right. They should be running tests.
You're right. If I run low on this hormone, please, then prescribe. I will do that.
And there's alternatives too. So that's another thing. You don't have to take a synthetic hormone.
Right.
There are other alternatives.
You can stimulate your body to create it.
Exactly. So, and that's the part of that I think people really need to understand is that when you take these synthetic products that are based from petroleum, there's risks. And although there are risks also from alternative modalities, they're far lower. And especially if you can find a practitioner who understands and honors, and most of these alternative practitioners, they are operating from a place of do less, do no harm. They're a little more closely connected to their oaths than a lot of these pharmaceutical doctors because they're just following protocols at this point. They're not actually thinking about, the responsibility that they have to do the right thing for their patients and the oath that they took to do no harm. So, but yeah, there's all kinds of safe and effective alternatives that can facilitate. It's like we talked about water birthing at the beginning of this. Like that's one of 10 things that I could talk about, when it comes to natural birthing to help prevent pain, prevent postpartum hemorrhages and side effects, prevent postpartum infections. I mean, there's a whole pharmacy of non-pharmaceutical interventions that we have access to that nobody wants to talk about because, again, there's no profit.
And the same thing goes with pregnant women, especially right now with folic acid. I was like, my wife was prescribed to take folic acid. I was like, why the acid? Why not the folate? Why not eating the right products to get the folate naturally? Oh yeah, right. So you can eat right. So maybe you should eat right in the first place and then take folate, not the folic acid, which is synthetic. And most of the women don't even know about it. They're like, I have to take this B9 vitamin, folic acid, right? Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And then even this conversation, I think comes back to the beginning of all of this, which is that when we don't have the foundational ethical leadership qualities to give us the
backbone to stand up.
Backbone to step into our power and need to even recognize when we have to do it. That's the thing. It's like people don't even recognize. So one of the things I talk about in one of the courses I do is like, how do you know when you're being violated, right? There are things that happen. The pupils dilate, right? The heart rate speeds up a little. The skin becomes a little warm, right? You might get a little warm. You might feel your hairs stand up a little. These are microscopic, tiny little signals that your body is sending you to say, hey, something is not right. And most people just completely override all of that. They don't even take a half a second to consider, wait a minute, what is my body telling me right now? You know, we've lost connection with our deeper selves that arm us with the tools to operate in these situations like the one you just brought up. When you get into a conversation with a doctor who's making a recommendation, like, wait a minute.
Miss what?
Most people don't even recognize that those things are taking place. They don't question. They've lost the foundational skills to ask the questions and operate from those foundational places of leadership, authenticity. Right?
But let's take newborns. So every newborn, they say every newborn has to take vitamin D, but you didn't do any blood work first. Second, maybe there is a purpose why breast milk does not contain a lot of vitamin D, right? What does it have in common with vitamin A? Maybe I should go out, let's say here in California, Southern California, 8 a.m., 9 a.m. and expose my little kid to 10 to 15 minutes a day, and he will get the dosage of vitamin D.
Yeah.
But you, in the first place, you prescribe something, always prescribing without any basis. How do you know that my kid lacks vitamin D?
Yeah.
Did you do blood work?
Right. I've looked at the data on this one as well, and it's really minuscule. The impacts of the vitamin D shots, they add a little bit of value. So I would say in any baby who has had any kind of traumatic birth, and there's signs of trauma anywhere around the head or the face or the body, there's definitely a benefit. But because those babies are at high risk for bleeding. But outside of those high risk births, the benefit risk ratio doesn't add up.
The same goes with the vitamin K, right? There is a reason why vitamin K is so low at newborn.
Did I say D? I meant K.
K? Yes.
I meant
That's about like, yeah.
That's, I meant to say K. Yeah, so vitamin K levels. So in babies who have had a traumatic birth, the vitamin K vaccine will help to protect them from
Vaccine or eye drops, right?
drops under the tongue.
Yeah.
You can do drops. So I've looked at the data between the drops under the tongue and the shots, and your basic. So the problem is that the moms who do the drops under the tongue might not be as compliant. So if you're compliant with those drops, they are just as effective as the shots. I've read the data, all of it. I've read all the data. So the shots, and so there was a study that was pulled on the vitamin K shot, linking it to, it was either leukemia or lymphoma. I think it was.
Both of them are horrible.
Yeah. And so that shot, there was a study done on the vitamin K shot that linked it to leukemia. And that paper was pulled. I wonder why. You know, the industry pushes that it's safe and effective. But, you know, some researcher found some links to leukemia for administering that shot. So for me professionally, right, if I take a look at that, even though that study was pulled, there was no other research done. So I don't have anything else to compare it to. Well, there was. Okay, there was. And they debunked it. And then they said, oh, there actually is no risk. But just the fact that there might be a risk versus, and when you take into consideration that the drops and the shot had the same outcomes.
Yeah. Why would?
I'm going with the drops.
Right. And I'm for drugs. I love doctors, but when I need treatment, please treat me.
Correct.
I thank you for that. If I need drugs, if I need pills, please give me those pills.
But when it becomes an industry.
Yeah, right. If I don't need them, I'm like, why should I take them? I should eat more, let's say, steak, eggs, veggies, fruits. I'm good for it. Prescribe me this.
Right. And that's the problem, is that the healthcare industry has become an industry for profit. And when you're monetizing the value of human life, what are we doing here?
Right.
So that's where we're at with these pharmaceutical industries and the insurance companies and the hospitals. They have monetized human life. So when you get in that position and you can't rationally ask yourself, wait a minute, what's actually going on here? We're not even having that conversation. And that's what the public needs to realize. When we can't even have the conversation about the conflicts of interest due to the monetization of health, that's a problem.
Big problem.
So,
Huge.
and again, that's what exited me from these industries, because I will not participate in the monetization of human life. I am here as a healer.
God bless
And
you.
when I see people who are jeopardizing human life and are not operating out of best practice, we are violating our ethics. It's not the way. So
Gail, I have the same question that is always the last one on my podcast. Let's have two assumptions with you. Assumption number one is the President of the United States, the position of the President of the US. He's the most powerful human being on planet Earth. Assumption number two is you become one. Once you do so, you have this all three-letter agencies, FBI, CIA, Secret Service, everything that answer to you. So you can ask them any question you want, and you will get the honest answer. You will know the truth. What would be your first question?
Ooh.
Because I know you have lots, but the first one I want to say is the most important one.
My first question would be, who's actually running the world? Because I don't really necessarily believe that it's the president.
Okay, so let's say they give you a list of names, of 10 names, last names. They actually run the world, right? You as a president of the US right now, at least for now, would you expose it to the public? It's like,
that's a good question.
It's not me who's pulling the shots.
Would the public be willing to accept those answers? So I operate under that assumption that I don't believe that the president is pulling the strings. I don't think that any president is. And I think that there are elites behind the scenes who have all the money, power, and control, and they don't want to be known.
Because presidents change.
Right.
But the rhetoric does not change for decades. So
Right.
it means it's not about the presidents.
So whether or not the public is ready to hear that and ready to actually face that head on, I don't know that they are. And if I, as the president, did expose that, would they use that to destroy me? Chances are yes. I mean, maybe that's why Trump hasn't done it. He's already had 2 assassination attempts. And even though, I mean, I don't know, it's hard. I try to stay away from these conversations because I think that it's all a psyop, and that, the people pulling the strings are, using all of these elected officials to create a show, to keep us docile, to keep us distracted, to keep us working, so that they can continue to, keep us under control. And again, that's a lot of what drives me into these conversations of ethics and leadership, because people have to rediscover who we are. If we can't be honest about who we are and that we are divine beings, right? We are children. This is my belief. Whatever your religion, doesn't matter. We are all children of the same.
Yeah.
We all came from the same place.
Right.
And we all have divine spirit inside of us. And when we forget that, when we forget who we are, how can we acknowledge the truth about anything? So, I mean, I'd like to say, yes, I would expose it and I would tell the public, but...
A quack, conspiracy theorist. Oh, look, we have a president that is a conspiracy theorist. Good job, guys.
Yeah, the public has to wake up. We have to reconnect.
Gail, thank you for everything that you do. God bless you. God bless your husband, your children. You got 2 children, right?
Yes.
God bless all your children, maybe even future children. How can you help people, and where can people find you?
Great. Yeah. So I have a presence on social media. I've got a website. I've got a business card somewhere around here with all my information.
Description. The website is right here, right now. I pull it up.
Yeah. And they can contact me. I do advocacy work. I do consultations. And I'm working on developing these foundational principles that are going to be required for us to step out of this fear-based mindset. So yeah, Unbound Trust Collective is one of the, that's at Proton Mail, Unbound TRST Collective at proton.com.me. I've got a website. I still need to work on it a little more. I'm developing other types of, again, educational content for leadership and empowerment. And hopefully in the future, once I get my kids through all this process, I'll be putting a lot more effort and energy into these tasks too, because right now they're my number one priority, and this is a side gig.
So I was actually amazed by the amount of knowledge that you have, because I've asked so many different questions and you didn't even stumble once. So it means that your knowledge comes not from reading one book or two books. It comes from you practicing and you having this knowledge. So I appreciate you coming, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.